Have you ever wondered if, like, the oldest beliefs that humanity has, like those whispers from the past, if they hold, like, more than just, historical interest? What if they have profound clues to understanding, like, who we are, where we're going? Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep into the divine cosmos, ancient wisdom, and the soul's evolution. And we'll be drawing mostly from Annie Besant's work, Ancient Wisdom, where she kind of brings all this together.
You can think of this as like a guided tour, yeah, through this like huge landscape of spiritual thought. What Besant tries to do in her work is like map out the common ground between all these like different ancient traditions. And it's really surprising the overlaps you find in how they understand the universe and the journey of the soul.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So for everyone listening, our mission today is to pull out the most, like, compelling of these shared ideas about the soul's evolution.
Yeah.
We want to give you a clear and insightful overview of these, like, really big questions without, getting too bogged down in all the little details. So where do we even start looking for these common threads?
Well, one of the things that Besant argues that is immediately striking is that a lot of these ancient traditions, they seem really different on the surface,
Right.
but they actually point to this underlying unity. In their core teachings, it's almost as if they're all drawing from the same like source of wisdom, even though they're using like, different methods or languages to express it.
I like that. Like, they're all using different buckets and ropes to draw from the same well.
Exactly. And one of the first clues that Besant points to for this idea of a shared source is this concept of a primal teaching, like some kind of foundational knowledge that was often like guarded and passed down through specific schools or lineages. She even uses the Tao Te Ching as an example. You know how it divides scholars based on their level of understanding? Like maybe that's evidence of this type of structured instruction.
Yeah, it suggests that wisdom wasn't always seen as something you, like, figure out all on your own, but rather like a tradition that's passed down,
Yeah.
that you build upon. And it's not just about, like, abstract ideas. Besant really emphasizes how consistent the moral and ethical principles are across all these different traditions.
Right. Like it's not just about having a framework for understanding the universe. It's also about how to live in the world.
Yeah, and it's really remarkable when you look at the scope of her comparison. She looks at, like, Taoism. Then you have all these different schools within Hinduism, like the ethical codes and Manu's ordinances,
Right.
the philosophical insights of the Upanishads, the epic narratives like the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita. Then there's the Buddhist teachings in the Dharma, the tenets of Zoroastrianism in the Avesta, the wisdom literature of Judaism found in places like the Psalms, Micah, Proverbs, Isaiah, and of course the core ethical teachings of Christianity, the Sermon on the Mount, Galatians, 1 John, even the principles attributed to Pythagoreanism.
Wow, it's really impressive the range of traditions she brings together. And it's not just like some vague call to be good either. Besant gives specific examples of these like overlapping moral guidelines.
Right. Exactly. It's so interesting how many of these seemingly unrelated systems place such a strong emphasis on truthfulness. Or take nonviolence. It's obviously a cornerstone of Hinduism and Buddhism, but is also echoed in the ethical teachings of so many other traditions. And then you have the idea of purity. Whether it's about your thoughts or your actions, it's another recurring theme. And then there are virtues like love, humility, and the pursuit of justice. These values are consistently elevated across so many different spiritual and philosophical traditions. Like, for instance, Besant quotes Manu's ordinances. It says, "Say what is true, let him say what is pleasing, let him utter no disagreeable truth, and let him utter no agreeable falsehood. That is the eternal law." And you find similar sentiments maybe phrased a little differently across so many other traditions. It's like this underlying agreement. And make you wonder, why this widespread consensus on basic ethical principles?
Yeah, it's a big question, isn't it? I mean, does it point to something fundamental about human nature, like some inherent understanding of what's beneficial and what's harmful for society? Or maybe, like Besant suggests, it really does hint at some shared ancient knowledge about how to live in harmony with the universe and each other. And it's not just the ethical teachings. She also briefly mentions like shared cosmological concepts and those extraordinary experiences that people report when they seem to transcend normal consciousness. It's almost as if there's this deeper shared understanding of reality itself.
Okay, so we're seeing this potential underlying unity in these, like, fundamental ideas and also in moral principles.
Yeah.
So let's dig into another core theme that Besant explores, the journey of the soul, particularly these ideas about reincarnation and what might lie beyond a single lifetime.
This is where things get really interesting, because this is where the East and West seem to diverge quite a bit in the popular imagination. But Besant actually finds these threads of connection even here. The concept of the soul's cyclical journey through birth, death, and rebirth It's central to a lot of Eastern philosophies, but Besant examines how it's present, sometimes explicitly, sometimes more subtly, in other traditions as well.
Right. When we look at Taoism, for example, Besson brings up this really fascinating story from Chuangzi about a person who's close to death. Their friend is kind of wondering, what will the creator transform them into next? Will it be like a rat's liver or an insect's arm? And the dying person replies by comparing themselves to metal in a founder's furnace, ready to be shaped into whatever form is needed. Now, it's not like a direct doctrine of reincarnation, but this acceptance of transformation, of being molded by a greater force. It could be seen as reflecting an implicit understanding of these ongoing cycles of existence.
It's more about a feeling or an attitude than a strict doctrine.
Yeah. It's less about a rigid framework and more about accepting the natural flow of change.
Exactly. It's about fluidity rather than fixity.
And what about the New Testament? Besant raises some really thought-provoking points there, especially for people who see Christianity as solely focused on this one life.
Right, she really challenges that simple view.
She does. She points to Jesus' statement about John the Baptist, that he's the prophesied return of Elias. He says, "This is Elias, which was for to come." Now that seems to imply some recognition of a previous incarnation, or at least some form of spiritual continuity. And then there's that part where the disciples ask about the man born blind. They ask, "Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And Jesus doesn't reject the idea of pre-birth sin right away. Instead, he replies that in this particular case, neither of them sinned. Besant interprets this as like a tacit acceptance of the possibility of a prior existence, or maybe this man accrued some karma that led to his blindness in this life.
Those are definitely interpretations that complicate the traditional view.
For sure. And then there's that mysterious line in the book of Revelation. "Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out." The suggestion there, as Besant points out, could be that reaching a certain spiritual level marks the end of the cycle of rebirth.
It's like graduating from the cycle.
Yeah, exactly. It's fascinating how Besant uses these seemingly isolated references to suggest a broader understanding of the soul's journey, one that isn't always stated outright, but that maybe underlies some of the core teachings. But then, drawing from her background in Theosophy, she presents this more detailed and structured model of this journey.
And this is where we get to this concept of the monad. It's often described as Atma Buddhi Manas. You can think of it as like the core spiritual essence, the fundamental spark of divinity within each individual.
Okay, let's try to break that down a little. So the monad, in this view, isn't a simple single thing. It's actually described as having three aspects. Atma, which is pure spirit, Buddhi, the spiritual soul or intellect, and Manas, the higher individual mind. And this monad goes on this incredibly long journey through these different levels of reality, or planes of existence, as they're often called. Like imagine a thread that runs through all these different types of fabric.
Yeah, that's a good way to visualize it. And these planes range from the most dense and material, the physical plane, to these increasingly subtle and spiritual levels. So you have the astral plane, the mental plane, the Buddhic plane, and the nirvanic plane. And Besant explains that the evolution of the forms that consciousness inhabits and the development of self-awareness, these are two interconnected but separate processes, both guided by what's called the logos, the divine, universal principle, and facilitated by these beings called builders. So it's like the logos is the blueprint and the builders are the construction crew of the cosmos.
So the logos sets this whole cosmic plan in motion, and these builders are like the architects and engineers, shaping this fundamental spirit matter into all the different forms that we experience. So let's focus in on our current level of existence, starting with the physical body. What does Besant say about that?
Well, she describes our physical being as having two parts. The dense physical body, which is made of the familiar solids, liquids, and gases. And then there's the etheric double, which is this more subtle energy body that kind of permeates and underlies the dense form. The main function of the physical body, according to Besant, is to interact with the physical world and receive impressions from it. And then there's prana. That's the vital life force that animates everything that's alive. And the etheric double acts as a conduit for this energy.
Okay, so it's like the etheric double is the energetic blueprint for our physical form. It channels this life force, and it acts as a kind of intermediary for our senses. Besant even talks about a health aura that emanates from the etheric double. It's like an indicator of vitality. Now, moving beyond the physical, we have the astral body. What's its role in all of this?
The astral body is like a more refined vehicle. It's a bridge between our consciousness and the physical body. And it's particularly related to our emotions and desires. And its development is really closely tied to our moral and intellectual progress. Now, kama, which you can translate as desire or craving, is seen as the main energy that manifests in the astral body. So as we experience emotions and engage with our desires, our astral body becomes more developed and complex.
So someone who cultivates more refined emotions and has better control over their desires, they would essentially be shaping a more refined astral body. Kind of makes intuitive sense when you think about it.
Yeah, it does.
So next we have the mental body. What's its function?
So the mental body, or what's often called lower manus, is the seat of our thinking mind, our intellect, the part of us that reasons and analyzes. It's described as the thinker, clothed in mental matter. This body develops through our experiences, our thoughts, the knowledge we acquire. The more we learn and engage our intellect, the more developed our mental body becomes.
Right. It's like the more mental workouts you do, the stronger that mental muscle gets.
Exactly.
But then Besant introduces another layer, maybe an even more significant one, the causal body. And this sounds like the place where the real long-term impact of our lives is stored.
You got it. The causal body is described as this permanent container for the essence of all our experiences. It holds the results of all experiences, both intellectual and moral. And this accumulated wisdom and character, it shapes our future lives. Now, the causal body, it grows really slowly. And it grows mainly through the assimilation of higher intellectual and, importantly, moral experiences. Think of it as the evolving core of your individual soul across multiple lifetimes.
Okay, so while our astral and mental bodies are temporary, they reform with each new life. But the causal body carries the core essence of who we are, our accumulated wisdom, and the patterns that influence our future. So what happens when we die, when we shed the physical body? Besant talks about this idea of devachan. What is that exactly?
Devachan is often translated as the heaven world or a state of bliss. It's described as a period of mental fulfillment that follows physical death. And in Devachan, the positive experiences and aspirations from your recent life are fully realized and worked out on a mental level. Now, Besant distinguishes between form and formless Devachan, suggesting that there are different levels to this post-life mental experience, depending on the individual's development and focus.
So it's not a physical place with pearly gates or anything. It's more like a state of being,
Right.
a kind of extended mental processing of the past life, where you get to experience the fulfillment of your noblest thoughts and desires. And then eventually the cycle starts again with reincarnation. How does that process work according to Besant's model?
Okay, so the thinker, carrying all the accumulated essence from the causal body, projects energy that attracts new mental and astral matter. This forms the new mental and astral bodies. And this process is guided by the patterns and tendencies that you developed in your past lives. And the law of karma, the principle of cause and effect, plays a big part in determining the specific physical body and the circumstances of the new birth.
It's like this continuous cycle of learning, refining, and evolving through these different bodies and planes of existence. It's all driven by our experiences and guided by the principles of karma. Now, what is the ultimate goal of this whole journey? What's the final destination? The ultimate aim of the soul's evolution, according to this ancient wisdom perspective?
The ultimate aim, as Besant describes it, is to go beyond the limitations of the individual ego-driven I and realize our fundamental unity with the One. That's the Logos, the divine source of all being. It's about recognizing that the feeling of separateness that we experience is ultimately an illusion.
So it's about recognizing our interconnectedness with everything. It seems like developing certain qualities, like selfless love and wisdom, those are key to moving towards this ultimate goal.
Right, and that's where the Buddhic body comes in. It's sometimes called the bliss body or the wisdom body. And it develops through cultivating pure, unselfish love and intuitive wisdom. This leads to a direct experiential realization of our non-separateness from all other beings and from the Logos itself. It's a state of profound unity and bliss.
So it's not just about intellectual understanding. It's a deep, heartfelt knowing.
Exactly.
And then beyond even the Buddhic plane, there's this nirvanic plane. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the nirvanic plane is described as the very heart of the universe. It's a realm of absolute unity and consciousness, and it's said to be the dwelling place of highly evolved beings called Mahatmas or Masters of Wisdom. It's a state that's beyond our current comprehension, characterized by profound peace and interconnectedness.
And Besant stresses that this principle of brotherhood, this fundamental spiritual unity of all life, it's not just a nice idea. It's an actual reality of existence, whether we're aware of it or not.
Right. She explains that as the soul evolves, its various vehicles of consciousness, the physical, astral, mental, causal, and Buddhic bodies, they become more and more refined. They become activated, allowing for greater expression of the inner, divine self. And ultimately, the goal is to reach a stage where you transcend the cycle of compulsory reincarnation, where the limitations of birth and death as we know them are overcome.
That's a really powerful vision. The potential to break free from the cycle of birth and death through this long process of spiritual evolution, the refining of consciousness. Now, Besant briefly mentioned some interesting phenomena that some people might see as hints of this process at work. Things like infant prodigies.
Yes, she suggests that those seemingly innate talents and knowledge that some children display, people like Mozart or those mathematical geniuses, those could be explained by past lives. It's like they're bringing that accumulated understanding from previous incarnations into this life.
Yeah, like they're starting further along the path because of their prior experiences. It makes you wonder about where those extraordinary abilities come from.
It does.
She also mentions this idea of advanced disciples called chelas, who might choose to renounce devachan. Now that sounds kind of counterintuitive. Why would someone give up a state of bliss?
Well, the idea is that these are highly evolved individuals. Driven by deep compassion, they want to serve humanity, so they might consciously choose to forego that extended period of blissful rest in devachan, and instead they choose to reincarnate more quickly, under the guidance of a spiritual teacher, to continue helping others on their evolutionary journeys. It's like the ultimate act of selfless service, prioritizing the spiritual growth of others over their own immediate personal bliss.
That's a whole other level of dedication. So to sum it all up, this deep dive into Annie Besant's ancient wisdom has given us this really vast and interconnected picture, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. We've explored this fascinating idea of a shared foundation underlying so many ancient traditions, especially in their ethical teachings. We delved into the cyclical journey of the soul through reincarnation, the progressive refinement of our consciousness across these multiple planes of existence, all guided by karma. And ultimately, we touched on that profound aspiration to realize our inherent unity with the divine and to transcend the limitations of our individual selves.
It's a really expansive cosmic narrative that Besant lays out. And it's amazing to see how these recurring themes echo across so many different ancient perspectives. It definitely offers a different lens through which to view our lives and our place in this universe.
For sure. As you reflect on all these ancient perspectives, maybe ask yourself this. How does this understanding of the soul's continuous journey, how does that maybe shift your perspective on your experiences, your challenges, your aspirations? If our lives are part of a much larger evolutionary arc, what kind of seeds are you consciously choosing to plant for your own future growth?
Those are some really powerful questions to ponder. We encourage you, our listener, to explore Annie Besant's ancient wisdom further if any of these ideas have really resonated with you. There's so much to discover within its pages. Ultimately, the quest to understand the nature of our souls, our place in the cosmos, that's a timeless and deeply personal journey. And these ancient insights offer a rich and thought-provoking framework for that exploration.